Welcome to the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. Today is Tuesday, August 13, 2019. I am Amidst. Instead of any of our regular topic that we usually address, today we try to take a look at no less important topic, the moral compass of our nation. Do you still have yours? We decided to take a look at it's more philosophical discussion, nonetheless related to the state of affairs in the country. We're trying to look at why we are where we at. Now, after conversation with many different people across the country from different political parties, whether you're Democrat or Republican, independent, or even if you don't belong to any party at all, if you've been watching what's going on in the country, you cannot but ask the question, is it really what you would want the United States to be? Now, I have found out if the individual is a Republican in general, but more specifically, someone who has supported Donald Trump, who voted for Donald Trump, that individual is more or less inclined to think there is nothing wrong with the country. But everybody else, including even Republicans, those who are truly conservative, those who are truly Christian, those who still believe that the Constitution of the United States ought to be what our government needs to go by, those, so it's not just Democrats, it's Democrat, Republican, Independent, everyone else who is not a Trump supporter, even some of the people who voted for Trump, now who have been watching what's going on in the country, have categorically come to the conclusion that this is not what he or she expected, and this is not what he or she would want the country to become. And we're going to show you through the prism of common sense, not only what we currently have, but what's causing it, who's causing it, and what ought to be done in order to get out of it. It has gotten to a point where it's really, really bad, and some people even ask the question, can we recover from it? The most optimistic people believe that we can, we will. No doubt, but how long would it take to recover? Now, that is for those who believe that there is a problem. So we do what we do here. We resort to a topic that can help us figure out how to move forward. Our moral compass in 60 seconds. Do you still have your moral compass? If you take a look at, if you watch what's been going on in this country for the past couple of years, first, the shocking election of 2016 put in the Oval Office an individual who has no sympathy, no empathy, an individual who uses whatever language he so want, vile, outrageous, an individual who goes after all social classes, an individual who actually bashes everyone who expresses an opinion about him that's not flattering. At the end of the day, we counted, we did analysis, and we found that most people in the United States of America, Republicans, who call themselves Christian, some call themselves Christian conservative, overwhelmingly went to the poll to vote that individual in office. We're not learning about Donald Trump today. Donald Trump was an open book. He actually exposed during the 2016 presidential election, both the primaries and the general election, who he really is. So there is no excuse, no argument that anyone who voted for Donald Trump could bring as excuse as to why they went to the poll and voted the vilest individual. Just a side note, today when you interview any Republican, whether it's a legislator or constituent, they say the economy is great. Just a side note, that excuse would not work, because at the time that they went to the poll, the individual that they voted for, the vilest individual, his record showed that he's been a failure when it comes to business. So the idea that they voted for someone and suddenly now they're citing the economy is great, as if he waves some kind of magic wand and then everything falls in place, we know that excuse is just that, an excuse. But let's stay on course. 85–90% of people who call themselves Christian, evangelical, Christian conservative, voted for Donald Trump. Now, the country, well, the rest of the country probably, looking at that and thinking, oh my God, how could people who call themselves Christian could stomach something like that and actually went to the poll to vote somebody like that? Oh, they had other excuses too. Hillary Clinton was bad. That's first irony of people who call themselves Christian. The very first irony. Now, I take great offense whenever I hear that those individuals who voted for Donald Trump and continue to support him are called Christian. You see, I grew up in a Christian environment. In fact, I hated it. I remember very clearly as a kid, my father had that ritual, and that used to irk me because I used to play soccer. I was good at it. Story for another day. People who know me, whenever I bring the conversation about that sport, the only sport I play, they know that the conversation will not end. So I'll spare you that, because we're trying to bring forth a much more important topic in order to understand why our country is going through what it's going through. And my father used to, it was a mandatory thing, obviously, with kids, so we had to go by the rules that my father established. Nobody could really do much about that. You have to. But nevertheless, I hated it. And the ritual had to do with every day at 6 p.m. exactly. Every one of us, all the kids, there were 6 of us in the beginning, 3 boys, 3 girls. We all would be found at home in a room with both parents praying. My father presiding, of course. We would read the Bible, we would sing every single day. And 6 o'clock, 6 p.m., in case during the summer in particular, it was devastating for me in particular, because I used to love playing the sport, soccer that is. And summer is, the days is much longer during summer. The days are much longer during summer. So at 6 o'clock, you just started playing as a kid. And 6 o'clock, in fact, we could not give any excuse that we didn't see the time passing, because there was this, I don't know what they call it, but there was this alarm, if you want to call it, a public clock, bell that would ring exactly at 6 o'clock. And if you're within the vicinity of that area in Port-au-Prince, then you cannot not hear that big bell. So there was no excuse for anyone. As kids, we could not give any excuse either. So we had to be there before 6 o'clock, actually, because the prayer start at 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. Now, as much as I just mentioned that I hate that praxis, that ritual, I grew up thanking God that it was mandatory that we kids had to be there, because we learned a lot, and that had shaped our lives. Knowing right from knowing and doing right instead of the wrong, and walking a quote-unquote righteous path, and knowing how our action can impact others, and what we should do before we say something, before we do something. And it becomes second nature for all of us to know that if we're going to do this and it's going to hurt someone, then we cannot do it. If we're going to say that and it's going to hurt someone, we cannot say it. So it ended up being a good upbringing for all of us. Bruv, of course, it was mostly, we look at it through spiritual eyes. So needless to tell you, when I'm looking at what Republicans today are doing, are saying, are behaving, and for them to call themselves Christian, it really gets on my nerve. Because they do what hurt others, they say what hurts others, and they think they're Christian. They've done the most egregious acts towards others. They support the most inhuman behavior, the most inhuman treatment of others, and they call themselves Christian. And I start thinking maybe they have a different definition of Christianity. And I start thinking maybe there is a different Bible from what my father was using. Because there is no way in the world that you could use the Bible, whether I'm sure different version, different translation of the Bible may give you kind of really small differences, because I've seen read different version of one particular, like King James version, King James Bible. Even in King James itself has different version that has slightly different translation, and as you look at other translation, other version, then you find out there are small discrepancies, but the essence stays. So when someone say, you go to church, you're a Christian, you read the Bible, and at the same time you're looking at that person's behavior, and you're saying, what the hell? You are a Christian? Now you want to talk to me about God? You want to tell me how good it is to be a Christian? And I start thinking, are those people really Christian? Do they believe they're Christian? Is it because they go to church and they think they're Christian? Because Christianity is not something you say to people. In fact, I would venture to say one of the most attractive thing about the United States is the fact that it was built using Christianity as its foundation. And for a very long time, the Republican Party has pretty much hijacked the idea of a party that has embraced Christianity. And the rest of the country has believed that was the case. Because they have this, they say, and that's the irony of things, they say they're Christian because they against this, it's a sin, they against that, it's a sin, they against the other, it's a sin. So they are good people. And they look at Democrat, and that's why they call Democrat liberal, because they do anything that they want. So that's the image that Republicans for a very long time had portrayed to the country, and everyone that has some sort of values or that has some sort of family values would want to be in the Republican Party, because the Republican Party has embraced all those family values. Now, I must say, in all fairness, that was always a cover, because even before Donald Trump, if you if you had been watching Republican in general, but those who call themselves in particular, they always present one aspect of their life to say that we for this, we for that, we for the other, and yet in their own private life they do worse than, the people they call liberals. So it has always been that way. In fact, I can give you even the most egregious example, the most horrendous example of people who call themselves Christian and practice. So, as I always mention in this program, that we know the history, so we're not really fooled the same way most other people are, because we know what people who call themselves Christian, what they really are about. If you watch this program before, you may recall that we talk about the period of slavery, in which time that the slave owners, the type of inhuman treatment they inflicted on the slaves, something that today would have landed anyone in jail for a very long time. And those people who were doing that were, you guessed it, Christian. So we know for a very long time that people who call themselves Christian, a lot of people who call themselves Christian, they have a lot of things that they've been doing behind closed door that are really worth taking a pause and ask, who are they fooling? Whom are they trying to fool? But with Donald Trump, all those people now don't see any reason for them to be hiding behind a mask. They don't see any reason to be hiding behind a mask anymore, because their role model in the Oval Office, the individual that they support and continue to support, say it's okay to show who you are. And they have been doing exactly that. In fact, the very fact that we're talking about 85-90% of people who call themselves Christian voted for and continue to support Donald Trump tell you that those people just like being called Christian, but they are not Christian. In the beginning of this conversation, they used to say, well, God said to forgive. But there was one problem with that argument. So they forgive someone who not only vile, has a foul mouth, and continue to practice and continue to use that kind of behavior, versus an individual who is, by any analysis, a very fine individual, someone who is trying to live the exemplary life of any American family. So their argument was also just that, an excuse. Now you may remember the expression that tell me whom you're with and I'll tell you who you are. Tell me whom you're with and I'll tell you who you are. People do not associate themselves with individuals they not like. In other words, we try to shift our attention, our interest towards other people with the same type of attention and interest and ideology. There is no argument there. You can spin things 1,000 ways trying to explain yourself, but the bottom line is in order to continue to support someone vile, someone who has a foul mouth, someone who doesn't care about others, someone who want to kick others, someone who want to insult others at all time, you have to share those ideals. There is no argument there. But what is troubling is the fact that those individuals who call themselves Christian now are trying to portray a different facade, while their very being, their very ways of life say exactly who they are. And it so happened that it's not just Donald Trump, it's not just the constituent, it's the whole Republican Party. So the country has lost its moral compass. I'm going to show you when they more or less wanted to prove or to portray that they have some values left. They understand that it's important. That's the Republican Party. They have to behave a certain way. They have to abide by the core values that they have or they claim to have. And there used to be almost a general consensus that those people, the Republican Party, the country could more or less rely on that party as a guide to do the right thing. That's why when they pause as the defender of the Constitution, the whole country believed them. When they pause as Christian, the whole country believed them. When they pause as a party that has family value, the whole country believed them. Now, as I mentioned, I'm talking in general when I say the whole country, because we, certain group in this country, already know that people who call themselves Christian are not necessarily Christian because their actions are not those of any Christian. Because calling yourself Christian doesn't make you one. In fact, it says in the Bible, we will recognize a tree by the fruit it bears. Oh, Jesus said that. So telling me you're Christian doesn't make you a Christian. Or even believing that you're a Christian doesn't make you one. Now, I don't know if those individuals who call themselves Christian really believe in the Bible, if they believe anything at all in the Bible, because if they did, their behavior towards others, their behavior towards fellow countrymen would be different. So I'm not certain that they even believe the Bible. They use the Bible, of course. They try to force the belief of the Bible on others, all the while doing things that even the devil would laugh. Or I should say, the devil would hesitate doing. Now, the reason it's that important, and I took that time away from talking about social political issues, is because the country is going is going through a downward, spiraling down in terms of values, in terms of morality, in terms of it's almost as if we are at a point that you have to ask yourself, what would it be like for future generations? Because they are growing up in an environment where people They seeing it happening right under their nose. They seeing their parents who claim to be Christian, the kind of thing their parents are doing. They seeing their neighbors who claim to be Christian, the kind of action those neighbors are doing right under their eyes. So those young generation, they're growing up in an environment that really have to be confusing to them as to what does it mean to be Christian. Because you cannot be reading the Bible telling you that you have to show love for one another, and at the same time you see those very people doing things that supporting, sometimes it's not them doing it, but supporting an individual that doing things that are even Machiavellian. We're not talking about small thing here, and we're not talking about something someone has done once or twice, repeatedly doing the wrong thing, repeatedly saying the wrong thing, and you have those people saying, "Oh, I'm Christian, but I support him." They have lost their moral compass. They don't have any. But some used to show that they had. I'm going to show you in just a moment. You see, the country was built, as I mentioned earlier, the foundation is pretty much, Christianity. That's the foundation of the United States. In fact, most Western countries have that as foundation. As such, we put ourselves having a high level of morality. We have a moral compass, and we use that, and we go around the world and saying that we want to show you the way. Now let me show you how a time when Republican legislator and constituent alike used to claim morality as their stronghold. They're the party of morality. You're going to see just in a moment.
So the point I'm trying to make is you don't even have to be convicted of a crime to lose your job in this constitutional republic if this body determines that your conduct as a public official is clearly out of bounds in your role. Because impeachment is not about punishment. Impeachment is about cleansing the office. Impeachment is about restoring honor and integrity to the office.
What you just saw is Lindsey Graham in 1998 in the House floor making a case to impeach Bill Clinton. And the reason is because Bill Clinton, as President of the United States, had an affair with an intern. And Lindsey Graham was making the case that this is not acceptable for the leader of the nation to have an affair. By the way, the information, the whole affair came later in the public arena, but it's something that was happening behind the scene. what today Republicans claim to have, like being Christian, and then doing everything that's evil behind the scene. So that was being done behind the scene. So Republicans get on the high horse and say, we do have a moral obligation to do something about it. 1998, Lindsey Graham and the evangelicals, those Christian conservatives, were up in arms. Yes, something has to be done. That president had to be impeached because, you know, it's not acceptable for an individual who sits in the Oval Office to have this type of behavior. What happened to their moral compass? What happened to that? Because they were outraged that an individual sitting in the Oval Office lacked integrity, ethics, could not be trusted, was not honest enough. Sometimes I wonder if they ever had any of those things. Yes, that was the compass that Republicans pretended that they had, and that's why you saw Lindsey Graham in the House floor making a case to impeach Bill Clinton because he had an affair with an intern. They had the semblance of they care about those things. Now, in all fairness, when Donald Trump bidded for the office of the presidency, and watching, observing his behavior, most Republicans, especially the legislators, including Lindsey Graham that you saw making a case for the impeachment of Bill Clinton, he too had a problem with even having this type of individual in the Oval Office. Having someone who has that kind of language, foul mouth, and that is the individual we would accept to be in the Oval Office. No way. No, Lindsey Graham would not have that. And it wasn't just Lindsey Graham. There were a number of Republican legislators, those who still not necessarily had values, but who still wanted the office of the presidency to be considered something of value. They would not stand for it. Now listen to Lindsey Graham telling us exactly that. Now notice that 2016, that was the presidential election, the last presidential election, 2016, and Lindsey Graham still had some shred of decency, still had some level of morality, still had some ethics, and still believed that somebody as vile with such a foul mouth as Donald Trump should not be elected president.
I'm not going to try to get into the mind of Donald Trump because I don't think there's a whole lot of space there. I think he's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office.
Yes, that was Lindsey Graham during the 2016 election making an observation about the individual who was about to become president. So Lindsey Graham still had some shred of decency. Lindsey Graham still has his moral compass. And Lindsey Graham, of course, having been in Washington for so long, could be considered as someone that younger generation could look up to and say, oh, this individual would not stand for something like that. And it wasn't just Lindsey Graham, because let's watch Ted Cruz.
I'm going to tell you what I really think of Donald Trump. This man is a pathological liar. He doesn't know the difference between truth and lies. He lies practically every word that comes out of his mouth.
And there was also Marco Rubio, and there were a number of Republican legislators who saw that Donald Trump was not material for the presidency of the United States. After the election, however, all those individuals have changed their tune. In fact, the same Lindsey Graham that I show you in two separate occasions, in 19 making a case to impeach Bill Clinton because Bill Clinton soiled the Oval Office, and in 2016 clearly giving his opinion about Donald Trump for the presidency of the United States. But after Donald Trump election, after the 2016 election and Donald Trump became president, Lindsey Graham became almost like what you would call a lapdog. To hell with morality, to hell with ethics, to hell with moral compass, to hell with Republican core values. All that out of the window. Now, you don't have a leader with moral compass. You don't have a leader with ethics. You don't have a leader that can actually keep the party focused on what's important, core values. So you have all the constituents without any such either. Do you still have your moral compass? Because the country currently has a serious problem. Because we have a whole political party, not some people, not a few people, but the whole Republican Party, both legislators and constituents alike, who still would like people to think of them as Christian, still would like people to think of them as a party that has values, but their actions, their everyday action clearly tells us that they have lost their moral compass. They don't have any such. Yes, it could have been a pretext. They could have pretended all along to have that and never did. But it was better than what we have today. Because at the very least, they were making some effort to pretend. Now they're not even making that. So what exactly do they believe in? Because obviously they cannot say they're Christian, they believe in God. Oh, of course they can say that, but they cannot prove it. Because telling me that you're a Christian, anybody can say that. Even the devil can tell me he, or if he's a he, she, who knows? Never thought about the devil's sex, but that's besides the point. So anybody can say they're Christian. And Republicans have claimed Christianity for the longest, doing the kind of evil that even the devil would cringe at. The way that they treated slaves, tortured them, execute them, and yet every Sunday they went to church, they're Christian. So we know all along that that was never the case. We kind of went along and think maybe with time they may have improved. So they have no moral compass. We know that. There is no argument there because it's being in display every single day. They have no moral compass. We had Jerry Falwell a few months ago making a statement. Someone who's supposed to be a religious leader leading thousands of people astray. When you have a religious leader who doesn't have any level of morality, any ethics, any integrity, then you know you have a problem. Because usually you look up to a leader to lead. But a leader that doesn't have anything substantial, anything good to offer to his or her followers can only go one way: lead them astray. The Bible gives us a pretty good reference. What exactly do you think would happen if a blind man is leading another blind? What exactly do you expect to happen? A blind leading the blind. There is no moral compass anymore. The idea of religious leaders, you can look up to religious leader and think, well, this person is living a life, he speaks like a leader, he has wisdom, and that person we can follow. There is no such thing anymore. It's a blind leading the blind. We watch now, not just in the religious domain, in the political domain, where the party that used to say, we're defenders of the Constitution. Yes, that party, the Republican Party, that used to pose as the defenders of the Constitution, who abides by the rule of law. Have you taken a look lately? They have lost their moral compass. Now that puts the country in a very, very bad situation. Because the party that used to claim those things never had them. Now they're showing without any, they're not even pretending not to have them. They just simply live just the way they've always been, without any moral compass. Now they used to hide that. They used to hide behind that, behind closed door. They used to be their selves. But in public, they used to behave a certain way. They used to speak a certain way. And they used to try to do something that continued to give them the appearance of someone who is Christian, someone who abides by the rule of law, someone who would not do the wrong thing, who would not say the wrong thing. Today, they don't even pretend anymore. They have lost their moral compass. So Republicans today have a knack for spinning things around in order to make their points, and they don't even have to try that hard. I don't even know why they're trying so hard to spin those things, because the constituent already on board. Those called Christian conservative, evangelical, they're already on board. There is no reason for a Republican legislator in Washington to try so hard to pretend, because who are they trying to fool? The rest of the country, those who they used to to sneer at, those they used to look at as not having any moral value, any ethics, those they used to look at as people who, people who do not have, who are not Christian. Those actually are people who are showing a higher level of ethics and morality than they ever had. But the big problem is the Republicans are still in control, and that is a danger for the country. Because you have people with no morale, no moral compass, no ethics, no integrity, people who pretend to be Christian and yet do everything that the devil would do. So we have a problem. The country has a problem. There is no moral compass. It's just people who are talking, who pretend to be, but in reality is nowhere close to anyone you would call a Christian. There is a reference in the Bible in the last days, day of judgment. You familiar with that? Well, book of Revelation, in which it provides really great detail as to how terrible it's going to be for the sinners. Some will come and say, God, remember me? I went to church, I pray, I put money in offering, I pay my tithe, I'm good, right? You don't need God for you to know what the answer would be. You don't need to read the Bible if you are today's Christian in the era of Trump. If you are that type of Christian, you don't need to read the Bible to know what the answer would be from God. But I'll tell you anyway, because you may have not read the Bible. Who knows? God said, I don't know you. I never know you. You weren't doing any of that for me. I have no idea who you are. Do you really need God for you to know that what the answer would be? Anybody today who call in the Republican Party, who call himself or herself a Christian, and knowing that you have been doing those type of things that you know wrong, you've been supporting an individual who've been doing nothing but evil, but you think, if you believe that there is some sort of reward for you in the end, you think that you can get that? You have lost your moral compass. You have been associating yourself with an individual who is, by any stretch of the imagination, an evil individual, and you think that you are entitled to something better? Now, if you listen to the other blind men that tell you that you're good, as long as you pay your tithe, give money to offering, you come to church, you shake hands with the other people who are there with you, and you're good. You have lost your moral compass. That much I can tell you. There is no amount of no frequency of going to church that can redeem you. There is no amount of tithe and offering that you give that can redeem you, because it's the essence of your being that you have been manifesting, you have put in display, you've been living, and that's currently pretty obvious to the rest of us that you are no Christian. You don't need the Bible to tell you that. You don't need the day of judgment to tell you that, because you have lost your moral compass. few days ago, actually more specifically last Sunday, there were two mass shootings. One in El Paso, Texas, and one in Dayton, Ohio. Total number of casualties, 31, that's dead. And as far as one wounded, close to 40 people, the two combined. While El Paso, Texas in particular, which has a sizable group of Hispanics living there, and the individual actually committed the mass shooting in Texas drove 10 hours from wherever he came from to go to Walmart in particular because he knew that it's a stronghold of Hispanic. But that's not really why I brought to the fore. While the community was grieving, just a day or so, in fact, the same or a day later, ICE was busy rounding up people, illegal immigrants, per the executive office, the White House, Donald Trump. You see, saying you're a Christian doesn't make you a Christian. You may even believe you're a Christian because, as I mentioned, you go to church, you pay your tithe and offering, you mingle, you network in a religious environment, obviously, but that doesn't make you a Christian. And I'm an expert in there, in that aspect. I grew up in that type of environment, so I know. Just like in anything in life, in everything in life, there are, rules, principles, and if nothing else, in case you don't believe in anything else, but the Bible tells you, you will recognize the tree by the fruit it bears. One will recognize a tree by the fruit it bears. So telling me, if a tree were to stand in front of you, and assuming that the tree could speak, and say, look at me, I'm an apple tree. That does not make the tree an apple tree if it's not an apple tree just because the tree say, I'm an apple tree. Because sooner or later you will pass by and you'll see maybe it's mango. And the apple tree may want you to think it's an apple tree because people like apple more. So every tree wants to be an apple tree. So that's why the apple tree is claiming, I'm an apple tree. I'm an apple tree. Look at me. And that's pretty much what Republicans have been doing. In the past 2+ years, it's been pretty obvious that that particular passage in the Bible applies. One would recognize a tree by the fruit it bears. And so far, we can say without any kind of reserve that those who call themselves Christian, those who call themselves evangelicals, they are not any of that. Yeah, they can call themselves that, just like a non-apple tree can call itself an apple tree. That doesn't make that tree an apple tree. So you can call yourself that, or you may even believe that you're that. Because in order for you to claim being a Christian, you have to live the life of a Christian. That's as simple as that. You cannot be for wrongdoing. You cannot support wrongdoing. You cannot agree with wrongdoing, and at the same time you want to believe you're a Christian. It just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. You can give yourself all kind of excuses for that. You can come up with all kind of explanation for that. Now there is a big difference between you do something wrong and using religious spiritual word, you repent from it. Right? You can do that. Now that's fine. You're a human being expecting you to make mistakes. But it is a different ball game when you do the same, you commit the same crime or the same sin over and over and over and adding to it day after day and after day. This is no longer in the same conversation. You are at that point an instrument of the devil. You're no Christian at that point. Because someone who's done something wrong, repent from it, then you can say, yes, oh, that person recognized that he or she has done something wrong and now trying to do better. But you stay in it, you do some worse, and you're adding it by the day. You're supporting people who are doing it, you're applauding it, you're cheering it, but you believe that you are a Christian. I suggest you look again, because you have lost your moral compass, and that, my friend, is not causing problem just to you, but to our society, to our country, to future generation, because your behavior, your children are looking at it, your grandchildren are looking at it, your words, your children listen to it, your grandchildren listen to it, and it's just not right. Would you use Donald Trump as a role model for your children, for your grandchildren? Would you? Would you use Donald Trump? Would you use Donald Trump as a role model for your children, for your grandchildren? Would you do that? I would venture to say people who are logical, and I'm not talking about Christianity here. I'll put that aside for just a second. People who want better for their children and their grandchildren would tell you categorically they would never in a million years use Donald Trump as a role model for their children and their grandchildren. And we all know why. Ask the individual that is encouraging you to support Donald Trump. Ask that individual that very question. The pastor that's telling you this is the person to support. this is the person to vote for. Ask that individual that very question. Jerry Falwell, would you use Donald Trump as a role model for your children, for your grandchildren? Ask that very question. And look at how they dance around the answer. And there is a reason for that. It's because they recognize Donald Trump cannot be a role model. Now that's confusing to me. That's very confusing to me, because now for those who want to lie and say, yes, I would use Donald Trump as a role model, explain how would you do that? What part of Donald Trump can you use as a role model for your children and or your grandchildren? What would you tell your children or your grandchildren why Donald Trump is a role model? Can you tell me something? As a matter of fact, I am open to suggestion here. If you are listening to this, or you watch this later, and you have the answer to that question, I'd like to know it. What would you use Donald Trump as a role model for your children or your grandchildren? What exactly would you tell your children or your grandchildren about Donald Trump that you would use him as a role model? I honestly would like to know, because I'm confused. So far, I can tell you what I found, but please, if you do have the answer, or an answer, whatever the answer is, I'd like to know it, because so far is what I found. Talking to Republicans, individuals who were open, frank, I found out that those individuals who indeed have a sense of how to raise their children to be better citizens would not even dare mention Donald Trump to those children. Those are Republicans, by the way, that I had conversation with. Because they cannot use Donald Trump as a role model. They cannot point, they cannot say to the children, he is the reason I would like you to emulate Donald Trump. There was one question they could not answer when I asked the follow-up question. Now, you came to that conclusion yourself. I didn't put it in your mouth. I didn't put words in your mouth. You came to that conclusion that you cannot and will not use Donald Trump as a role model for your children or your grandchildren. But why would you want somebody like that to be president of the United States? They could not come up with a good answer, because if someone is not good enough for you to use as a role model for your children and your grandchildren, why in the world would you support that individual to represent your country, to be the leader of your country? Because if I support someone, at the very least, I can use that person, I can point to that person as a model, as an example as to what you should strive for. But if you cannot do that, why would you support that individual? Ask any of those Republicans. Ask any of them. The Jim Jordan, the Mark Meadows, the Lindsey Graham, all those people today that are steadfast defending Donald Trump. Ask any of them to answer that question for you. ask your religious leader why he or she continues to support Donald Trump. Would he or she use Donald Trump as a role model for his or her children and grandchildren? Because as it stands today, the country has lost its moral compass. I do hope this presentation was very useful to you. The United States is currently going through a very serious crisis of leadership in the Republican Party. Tomorrow we will also tackle the problem the country is confronting with the Democrat Party. We are at a crossroad. The upcoming generations, as it has always been with every passing generation, have always looked up to the previous generation for guidance, for direction. Today, this generation has failed the future generation. Politicians, religious leaders, they all have failed the future generation. They have been going down a path which is not good for the country, which is not good for the future generation. We have made a lot of progress. We can send people to the moon and very soon to really far away planets. We have made progress in transportation. We have made plenty of progress. Sometimes make our heads spin. And yet when it comes to human interaction, when it comes to human understanding, we have been regressing. Society has become worse and worse, and the leaders have become less and less wise, less and less competent, and the religious leaders have become more and more selfish. The United States is at an impasse, a moral impasse, because the leaders, both political and religious, have lost their moral compass. In the meantime, should you have a particular topic you would like us to talk about, send it to us. We will research it, we will debate it right here on the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. I hope you can join me again tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. for another important episode of the Fourth Branch program. Good day. That was an update through the prism of common sense. Join us again tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. Send us comments, criticism, suggestion, or simply let us know how we're doing. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful afternoon. See you next time.